Hello, I'm Paul Peterson. Did you know that 85% of United States adults have gambled at least once in their lives? And over 80% just in the past year. Since 1975, the proportion of adults who have never gambled dropped from 1 in 3 to 1 in 7. 48 states have some form of legalized gambling, the only exceptions being Utah and Hawaii. This expansion has caused plenty of cases of problem gambling. And today we will examine how seniors can be affected by this dilemma that damages personal, family, and vocational pursuits. Stay tuned for Aging in LA. Welcome to Aging in LA. Gambling, or playing a game of chance for money or other stakes, has become a popular activity for people of many ages, and seniors are no exception. Although there are no legal gambling establishments in the city of Los Angeles, there are plenty of casinos in neighboring communities that offer a wide array of gambling opportunities. Now, opinions vary on whether seniors are at special risk from gambling. Some people say that seniors are lured into squandering their savings by what amounts to a very glitzy form of adult daycare, replete with defibrillators, free oxygen tanks, and hydraulic gaming tables that can accommodate people in wheelchairs. The gaming industry, particularly casinos, have aggressively marketed to the senior population. In fact, some facilities offer discounts on prescription drugs to people who join their player clubs. Today, we'll look at problem gambling in our senior population. Joining us, Dr. Antoine Bechara from the Brain and Creativity Institute at the USC College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, who has done many studies on addictive personalities, and Mr. Bruce Roberts, Executive Director of the California Council on Problem Gambling, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping problem gamblers and their families. Thank you so much for joining us. Doctor, let's do some science here. There is a scientific basis for gambling and other addictive behaviors, particularly as it relates to seniors. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me start first by conceptualizing why addictive behaviors really happen and what actually happens in older adults,
Please.
When the brain ages. You can view addiction as two systems struggling with each other. One is just like the accelerator in the car, and this is really a system that lure us toward pleasurable things,
Yes.
toward a reward. But there's another part of the brain, that's the frontal lobes, that most frontal part of the brain. It's like the emergency brake in the car. So it tries to help us exert self-control on behaviors that could be bad for us in the long term. So in addiction, it's always it's a situation where actually people continue to pursue an activity that may be rewarding for them, but at the risk of incurring rising negative consequences that involve family, friends, financial losses, and so on.
And physiologically, this frontal lobe, but this deteriorates over time as we get older.
So there you go. So then addiction, people become vulnerable to addiction or susceptible to addiction when that part of the brain begins to wear off or deteriorate. And this part of the brain begins to wear off, as we grow older. Now, what is really interesting about all of this is that, when we get older, a lot of people may begin to suffer memory problems.
Yes.
Then everybody pays attention to them. When this part of the brain begins to deteriorate, there are no signs of cognitive problems. So the person look like they have good memory, they have
they're still sharp,
and everything.
right.
but they begin to make poor decision making in daily life. In pursuing addictive behaviors, it's part of it.
I see. Now, in the real world, Bruce, are you getting increasing calls at the gambling hotline from seniors or loved family members of seniors who have suddenly sort of slipped into addictive gambling behaviors?
Yeah, and seniors, by the way, are the last group or slowest to call in and ask for help.
Really?
Absolutely.
Why?
We don't know why. Yeah, you know, some research needs to be done on that, but we definitely see that gambling goes on in a senior's life much longer than, let's say, a female's life. Females are the quickest to call in, and we don't know why that is either. We have suspicions, but nothing concrete that I could share today. Just for example, in the last year, I took a look at our helpline report this morning,
yes,
and we know that about 5% of the calls are over age 65. 5% of the callers. We also know that another 10% are between the age of 55 and 65. So, defining seniors as over 55, we're talking roughly 15% of the callers.
Wow, that's a significant slice of the population, and it's growing every day as the boomers translate into formal seniorhood, if you will. Wow, that's really something. We were talking earlier about how many addictive behaviors for young people can be explained by the lack of development of their frontal lobes. And you said something that just shocked me, that the last to develop is the first to go for seniors.
That's right.
Now, that's amazing.
Yes.
And this is addictive behaviors across the board, correct?
Right.
It's not specific to gambling.
Yes, because I mean in addiction there are two issues that we always struggle with. There's the issue of vulnerability or susceptibility, and that means it's that part of the brain that wears off and it makes you vulnerable to become addicted to anything. And then there's the issue of specificity. That is why some people become gamblers, not heroin addicts, and so on. And that's a different mechanism altogether. Now, in my opinion, now the reason in older people, why they turn more into gambling, and probably some of it alcohol, but not other drugs. I think it's the issue of availability.
Oh, indeed.
These are people who've never done these things in their life, and now there's something in their brain that makes them more vulnerable. So it is those activities that are available that sets them up for it. Now, commenting on the lack of awareness.
Yes.
That's a part of the frontal lobe syndrome itself, that usually people when that part of the brain declines, one of the hallmark or one of the signs is a lack of awareness that there's anything wrong with them. So a lot of times they're not aware that they have a problem.
Well, is it as simple as suddenly filling out all those sweepstake entries that you get in the mail that you used to just throw away? Is it that simple? And the gaming industry is pretty pervasive when you think about it, right, Bruce?
Well, it's not that simple for problematical gamblers. It is for the general population or the general senior population. But those that have entered into the world of problematical and even to pathological gambling, it's a lot more serious. We tend to brush it off as something that has no real impact on society. We tend to brush it off as having no real impact on the human being. But the fact is, I got an interesting call 2 months ago from a man that runs a senior outreach program in India. And he tells me that for the last 2 years, their budget's gone by September. And he's been concerned about that, so he started asking in detail from these seniors that came in for help to buy prescriptions, to pay the rent, to have a place to live, what happened to the money. And in almost every case now, it's gambling. And
wow,
that's something that really has to be addressed.
Well, this is very interesting because this can sneak up on someone. I mean, you may have an excuse like, oh, there's the trip with the girls to the casino or to the racetrack, or let's all pool our money and buy lotto tickets.
Sure. And
then it can slip into kinds of behaviors that have negative influences, as you were explaining to me. And this can grow worse over time, correct?
Right. Right.
And other things are going to influence this, the kinds of medications you may be taking, your use of alcohol, right? I mean,
Sure. That's the thing, because a part of the syndrome is really making poor decision making. That is, not being able to make decisions that are good or beneficial to the person in the long term. And that could go across not just getting into gambling behaviors or behaviors that lead to financial consequences. It could be about making bad medical decisions, you know,
Right.
taking the wrong drugs or not taking the drugs or not buying the drugs in order to gamble and so on. So, so there could be signs of making poor decision making across the board.
I got you. Now, Bruce, I'm sure there are people watching now who are going, uh-oh, this describes mom, dad, a loved one. Let's get right to the helpline. People can ask for help, correct? And starting with your 800 number is a good place to start.
No question about it. For Californians, that number is 1-800-GAMBLER. And we're very proud of the helpline because it's the one really positive thing that California has done to assist problem gamblers. As of today, there's no state-funded treatment. There are no programs, educational programs. There's some very small prevention programs in place. But other than that, the helpline is the crown jewel of California service to problem
Now,
gamblers.
don't be anxious. We will have that number up on the screen for you. Copy it down. But give us that number again, please.
That's 1-800-GAMBLER.
Okay, 1-800, well, that kind of describes it, 1-800-GAMBLER.
Exactly. And when they call that number, what will happen is they'll talk to a master's level counselor trained in crisis control and in gambling addictions. And what they'll try to do is they'll try, most people that call the helpline don't call it joyous and free. They call because they're really in some kind of critical shape, or their families, friends and families and relatives are calling to see what can be done to try to put the pieces back together again, so to speak. So most people are in pretty desperate straits when they call,
Right.
and the counselors are trained to get them back to a more normal way of thinking so they can see what the problem is, identify it, and give them some solutions as to how to deal with it.
Well, interested, well, the street vernacular is hitting bottom, and people sometimes just can no longer ignore the negative consequences of their actions. What kind of help is available for people with this growing problem in their senior years?
I'm afraid to say probably there are no direct help
Really?
for that. But what is important, and I don't think it's available, is informing people. See, a lot of people, see, that's the part of the problem with whoever have frontal lobe signs, is that they look normal in every other way, and people don't understand why they behave the way they do. So it just learning or information is very important. So this may not be helpful to the person, him or herself, but at least to the family, the people around them, understand why people are behaving the way they are. But unfortunately, you know, I can't think of any, let's say, pharmacological interventions that would do that. I mean, there are no good treatment for frontal lobe signs.
But it's very important people understand, as you explained
Right.
to me earlier, that about half of the senior population
Yes.
is vulnerable.
Right, yes.
So this is something...
Yes. What is exactly? What is very interesting is that if we take out the older people who show signs of memory, people who look cognitively intact, there are about half of them are perfectly normal. They are as good as 30 years old.
Right.
But there's about half who show frontal lobe signs, and these are the ones I would say are vulnerable to a lot of these activities.
Okay, well, these are very important cautions and warnings. It's time to take a short break. When we return, we will continue our discussion of gambling seniors. We'll be right back after these important messages.
Hi, I'm Dom DeLuise, and I am reading a book. I have dyslexia, and I am learning through listening. There are tens of thousands of students who have print disabilities. And by calling the Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic LA, they can get help. The number is 1-800-499-5525. What did you think of that? See? We both agreed.
Need a recycling center? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall. Graffiti removal? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall.
Welcome back to Aging in LA. Our topic today, gambling seniors. Our guests in the studio, Dr. Antoine Butara from the Brain and Creativity Institute at USC, and Bruce Roberts from the California Council on Problem Gambling. Now, during the break, we mentioned to each other that this is a question of awareness, of building awareness in the community, that this is a lurking problem, and many of the seniors, frankly, are defenseless against this. They are not sophisticated about these marketing schemes, right, Bruce?
Well, that plus, we're in a gambling permissive society. The government's using gambling revenues to balance the budget or attempt to balance the budget. We're in a society where, for children, teachers say it's okay to gamble because they allow Monte Carlo nights and Las Vegas nights, and churches are saying it's okay with the bingo and what have you. Parents are gambling, so kids look up to their parents. Now seniors, they're not informed either, so they're at the same, they have the same loss to deal with this, because if they drive down, if a senior drives down the freeway, and they'll see a billboard and it says "Don't drink and drive," right? But the next sign they'll see is a casino sign where everybody's happy, and there's nothing but upside. The lottery says big upside, small downside.
Right.
And they're selling that not only to seniors but to the general population as well. So what I think needs to be done is we need more outreach to seniors, whether it's through mass marketing or individually through senior centers and what have you, to let seniors know that there is another side to gambling besides what you see marketed to you by the casinos and by the racetracks and the card clubs. I don't mean to focus on any one group.
Would you have in mind a state program, a state-funded program for this education, or is this something that should take place on site, at the casino, at the racetrack? Because you do have your 800 number posted in all of these places, right?
We do, but seniors are relatively new to the world of gambling, in my opinion. I'm talking about the kind that makes it real easy for them to get to not only get to a racetrack, but get to a casino. Most seniors now have a casino within 30 or 40 or 50 miles, or if they don't drive, the casino will send a bus and pick you up and bring you there. So,
well, many assisted living facilities have casino nights where they bring a bus and the senior residents climb on the bus and head for the casino.
Exactly. So, in the recent prevalence study, for example, it says that about 1 out of 20, or 5% of the people, will become problematical about gambling. Now, if you send a bus full of 20 seniors who are out for their first time to visit a casino, one of those folks, if the law of numbers holds up, is going to turn into a problem gambler. And by becoming a problem gambler, that accelerates into pathological gambling in many, many cases. And that's where you see, seniors have a problem that's unique only to seniors.
And what's that?
They have no earning power.
Yes,
so when
right.
it's gone, it's gone.
Right, when you're in a fixed income, if you blow it, or
not
you
only
blow
fixed
your
income,
retirement.
I hear stories of $500,000 401ks being burned up. I've heard people losing houses. All I need to do if I want to really need a refresher course in why I do what I do is visit our helpline center and take a few phone calls. And I'll hear from seniors, and I'll hear the stories, or I'll hear from kids and grandkids of seniors. What can I do? She won't stop. She just wants to play, and she tells me it makes me feel good. You see, seniors are unique in other ways also. They have more disposable income than any of segment of the population.
Of course.
And they have more time than any other segment of the population. So what's more convenient than to be marketed day and night via television or the internet? And speaking of the internet, I find that interesting too, because when the poker craze started, you know, some genius got the idea, hey, we can market this to seniors. And so you may remember the commercial with the old man. It's as simple as getting your email.
Right.
I'll never forget that. And so a lot of seniors now turn to internet gambling, and we have no way to find out. You know, some serious research needs to be done there. But you know, seniors have to worry about their health.
Sure.
They have to worry about unrealistic expectations of retirement. In other words, they retire and it's not what it was cut out to be, and depression sets in, and boredom, loneliness, and that sets in for many, many seniors, you know. And so they get relief from that by going to a
Doctor,
casino.
I want to ask, why does it feel so good, the thrill of gambling, even when you're losing? What is it about just the act of gambling that makes people feel good?
Well, it's because it's all about reward, and the activity has a capacity to trigger certain neural systems inside our brains that they have a chemical called dopamine, which exactly can be triggered by other drugs, like you know, drugs of addiction. So in other words, we do have neural systems inside our brains that respond to reward, that respond to pleasure. And gambling activity, because money is tied to reward, because we learn from early on to associate money with getting any reward that we want, you know, food, pleasure, shelter, everything. So it's a powerful reward stimulus, and it works through the same system. So there's a thrill when you know, when you win money. So the brain is wired to respond that way.
I see. Are there things that we might look out for, alterations in behavior or changes in, you know, habits and rhythms, where suddenly a person who never went to go bet on the ponies is suddenly going out to the racetrack every day? Is there something a family can go, oops, we better call?
Well, it's difficult. We call pathological gambling the hidden addiction, because there are no external signs similar to chemical dependency. There's no slurred speech. People walk normally. They try to hide it as best they can because of the shame and the guilt associated with what they're doing. Their eyes aren't dilated. All the chemical signs aren't there because you don't ingest anything with gambling. So it's what we call a process addiction. And so it's very difficult for a loved one. They have to be tuned into changes in behavior is exactly what isolation is a big one. They don't want to socialize anymore. When and if they go to a casino, just drop me off and pick me up in 8 hours or whatever. You know, and when they're in the casino, they won't be with a group. They'll be isolated off by themselves in their own little dream world. They don't want to be bothered.
Well, not to frighten people, but if there is this 50-50 vulnerability that we've talked about earlier, does that number increase the older you get? I mean, for example, is it different for an 80-year-old than for a 70-year-old?
Oh, definitely so, because that area of the brain deteriorates over time. I mean, it's like it develops slowly. It begins to deteriorate slowly, given that no other pathological process sets in, you know, like what we have in Alzheimer and other dementia. So definitely, the older you get, the more vulnerability there is. I
see. Now, this is very interesting, because it might very well be, I've noticed this with other addictive behaviors, that the folks who are themselves at the cusp, who are about to engage in addictive behaviors, always notice it in other people. Oh, they point a lot of fingers at young people, and yet we're talking that same frontal lobe, either lack of development or deterioration. It's amazing that works. Now, once again, I want to repeat that the 800 number will be scrolled there in the bottom of your screen. Take a minute if you or a loved one is the topic, a part of the topic today. Now, Bruce, the increasing numbers of people who are calling in asking for help, You're okay with resources? Can the state do more?
Well, definitely not okay with resources. You know, I testified before a Senate committee last week, and I said the cruelest joke of all is to have a helpline without help. And you know, people call in, and the best we can do is to try to, like I say, counsel them into some sense of normalcy, and you know, give them the location of the nearest Gamblers Anonymous meeting.
Outstanding.
It works for thousands of people, and it'll work for you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for today's edition of Aging in L.A. Thanks so much to our guests, Dr. Antoine Bouchara from the Brain and Creativity Institute at the USC College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, and Bruce Roberts, Executive Director of the California Council on Problem Gambling, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping problem gamblers and their families. Now, if you suspect that gambling is becoming a problem for you, try using these guidelines to moderate your play. Set a dollar limit and stick to it. Set a time limit. Leave when you reach your limit, whether you are winning or losing. Don't borrow money to gamble. Don't chase losses. Chances are you'll lose even more trying to recoup your losses. Know the warning signs of problem gambling that we have discussed today. And make a note of the problem gambling helplines right there, 1-800-GAMBLER. The Los Angeles Department of Aging produces this program with CityView, Channel 35, so that seniors living in Los Angeles and surrounding communities are well informed on the many issues that face them in everyday life. And also to let you know of the many services that the Department of Aging offers our senior citizens. Now, we'd like to hear from you with comments on the program, what you like, what you think can be improved, and ideas for future programs. So please give us a call. The number's on your screen, 213-252-4088. That's 213-252-4088. Call us with your comments and ideas. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Paul Peters.